What if the biggest economic story in America right now actually has nothing to do with poverty? What if the real story is that working people, people doing everything exactly right on paper, still can't afford a normal life? They've got the jobs, they pay the bills, yet they're sitting exactly one bad month away from total financial collapse.
For years, the whole conversation has been laser focused on acute poverty. But there's this massive new update from the Urban Institute that forces us to ask a much harder question. Seriously, how did the cost of just living an ordinary life get so astronomically high that basic stability became a luxury?
49%. In 2023, nearly half of the entire country lived in families with resources falling below their local economic security threshold. Just let that sink in for a second. Half the country. The defining economic crisis of our time is no longer just about those at the very bottom. It's about how fundamentally expensive survival has become for everyone else. We've actually been missing the full picture for a while now, mainly because we've been using the wrong lens. For decades, we measured economic distress using this outdated poverty line from the 1960s, which was based almost entirely on the cost of food. But the new framework, the true cost of economic security, it measures reality. It factors in the non-negotiable costs of modern society. We're talking childcare, healthcare, housing inflation, tech, taxes. And once you measure what life actually costs today, the scale of the problem just explodes. So this creates what economists are now calling the fragile middle. These are millions of households that look completely fine from the outside. They're officially employed, the lights are on, but behind closed doors, they are entirely unable to save for the future or absorb even a single financial shock. They're stuck on an economic hamster wheel. It's not some sudden dramatic crash. It's a slow, invisible squeeze. To actually escape that squeeze, to reach a stable foundation where parents can invest in their kids and actually survive an emergency, well, the new estimated baseline for a typical family of four is approximately $145,000 a year. That is the new floor, just to thrive, rather than merely survive. And when you zoom into localized data, the math gets even darker. Take New York City, for example. A household with one adult and two children faces an average annual resource gap of over $46,000. A family of four needs nearly $160,000 just to hit the threshold. And look, this isn't a lack of effort or market income. This is a severe, localized cost crisis that is structurally breaking household budgets. But here's the thing, this pressure doesn't hit everyone equally. Your financial vulnerability is largely dictated by your family structure. 44% of working-age households without children are insecure, but the absolute moment you add children, that jumps to 56%. And for single-parent families, a staggering 62% fail to secure enough resources to meet their local threshold. The modern economy basically heavily penalizes families who are just trying to raise kids. And then there's this demographic reality that makes it even more brutal. 75% of caregiving households, meaning situations where someone requires specialized care and all adults are under 65, they fall below the threshold. They face this devastating dual penalty. On one side, you have massive out-of-pocket medical costs, and on the other, reduced earnings, simply because someone usually has to cut their working hours just to provide unpaid care. So why is this happening on such a massive scale? Well, it comes down to a macroeconomic collision. Since 2017, nationwide average earnings grew by about 20%. But during that exact same window, the costs of critical, non-negotiable goods completely skyrocketed. It's a massive price-wage disjunction. And it's not just contained to coastal cities like San Francisco anymore. This inflation of absolute necessities has rapidly infected places like Central Florida, Tennessee, Ohio, and Wisconsin. The math simply does not work. Earnings went up 20%, sure, but monthly rent prices surged 44%. Affordable Care Act Silver Health premiums up 45%. Average home sale prices skyrocketed by 47%. When the core costs of simply existing, like housing and healthcare, vastly outpaced wage growth, having a job is no longer a guaranteed pathway to economic security. When the math breaks, people adapt. But these short-term survival tactics are creating some really deep, long-term damage. Families are draining their savings and relying heavily on buy now, pay later apps just for basic liquidity. People are delaying necessary medical care and skipping prescription refills. 2/3 of consumers are downgrading to cheaper, highly processed foods. Parents are literally cutting their hours at work because childcare costs eat up so much of the paycheck that working becomes almost pointless. These small, daily choices are compounding into permanent health and career degradation. And this structural crisis is reaching into places you'd probably never expect. Right now, roughly 20% of active duty military families are experiencing food insecurity. Think about that for a second. These are federal employees receiving regular pay and housing allowances, yet they are being pushed into food banks. Why? Because their housing allowances have completely failed to keep pace with rapid rent inflation, forcing service members to cannibalize their food budgets just to keep a roof over their heads. Because this pressure is so undeniable, it has become a massive political battleground, and policymakers are deeply divided on the fix. On one side, proposals focus on subsidizing demand and patching the immediate pain, things like rent relief, capping hospital rates, or strategic tariff exemptions. On the other side, supply-side advocates argue for tearing up the system itself. They're pushing legislation to unlock federal land and gut local zoning laws to radically build more housing. So we're left with a profound structural dilemma. Do you patch the immediate bleeding, or do you risk radically changing the very system that keeps causing it? The math of the American dream has been quietly rewritten. The question isn't just how we fix it, but rather, how did the cost of ordinary life get so high that stability itself became a luxury?
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.